Today we're going to do a quick history of Scouting in America. Hey, ScouterStan. Let's talk a little bit about the history of Scouting in the United States. This is going to be kind of a Class 101 history on Scouting, and we have to know a little bit about it, but it is a huge subject. Just touching the very top subject lines of things that happened to get us where we are now took over 100 years. So it's going to go really fast, and there's going to be a watch list of videos that's going to be a little longer, but I will put it up there and go there. It's through the entire video, okay? You can go there and look at more stuff and then come back. I mean, you choose how you want to research the history, which is absolutely fascinating. Now with that, we are going to touch into some things that can be kind of triggering for some people. So keep in mind, history is not always pleasant. So, and that's something that is interpreted by the individual. So if you're someone that gets kind of triggered by these things, don't watch, okay? Just turn us off, and I won't mind, go to another one of the videos. That's something that you can choose, but keep an open mind when we cover those subjects. Remember, we are scouts. Everyone watching this is in the scouting program. All the adults, even the youth that watch this. This is something that we need to keep in mind, the Scout Oath and Scout Law, to be courteous and kind and so on in the comments. So if somebody even says something about this video that you don't like, please do not go off on them, okay? So that is something we have to check that before we start making those comments, okay? We don't want to be a hostile environment, okay, for triggered people to vent all kinds of terrible things. So we need to keep that in mind. Scouting in the United States is over 112 years old as of this recording. And because of that, it's all based on the British Scouting, which kind of goes back a little further. Now, Scouting kind of goes back to the formation of the YMCA with Sir George Williams in 1844. That's before the American Civil War. So that's kind of where the youth programs kind of started. And the reason for their formation was really to give young people some way of recreating and being together, and what we call Scout Fellowship. That's really where it all began. They wanted something to have that environment, and the Young Men's Christian Association was a place for that. Now keep in mind, this is all it's the Industrial Revolution is going on, and there's all kinds of stuff, and they really needed this as a core. Now from this environment, Baden-Powell, or Baden-Poole, as I've been told it's spoken, and that's how it's said. And by the way, Baden-Powell didn't like that. He liked BP. So for the rest of this video, I'm just going to call him BP, all right? Because the last name for 40 years, I always said Baden-Powell, but apparently it's Baden-Poole. I didn't know until I actually heard Baden-Poole say his last name. I didn't know. So BP was actually born in 1857. So he was born during that, that time when the YMCA and all the Young Men's Christian Association was going. That was something that was going on. BP, as a young man, loved the outdoors, loved going outside, he loved drawing, he was an adventurous. He wanted to do fun things and have adventures. That was a big thing with BP. And BP actually started, in his education, started spending a lot more time with nature. And that kind of developed over time. Eventually in school, he eventually left school and joined the military. That was what he was best suited for. That's according to his mother. Now, his military career took him all over the colonies of Britain. He spent time in India and in Africa and all over the place. Eventually, he ended up in a little town in South Africa called Mafeking. And he, during the Second Boer War, actually was able to keep the town from being captured. And during that time, he actually organized the youth that were also trapped and encircled by the enemy. They were trapped. He got the youth to do a lot of the jobs that the fighting men would end up doing. So that was a great way to use his resources. At the same time, this is right at 1900, this is the year of 1900, he had written a book called Aids to Scouting. Now that was a military book, but it kind of caught on. And his experience in Mafeking and getting the cadets, that he called them, to do a lot of work for the community really developed in his mind that youth can be very useful in helping in a crisis. Now the siege of Mafeking went on for almost a year, and because of Baden-Powell, he became a hero in the eyes of the British people. His book was being published in England, in the actual UK. They were actually buying the book. Youth were buying his military book and using a lot of the things that he talked about in there to organize and start emulating what he was talking about, but in a civilian situation, but it was written for the military. So it was a little bit of it was weird. When he got home, he was kind of freaked out by seeing youth running around with his military book. He thought that was kind of strange. So over time, around 1907, he started an experiment, and the experiment was on Brownsea Island. Brownsea Island is a wonderful place if you go there today. It was an experiment taking all different classes of youth, whether they be poor, middle class, or even upper class, those different groups, and was able to mix them together and come up with a scouting idea. It was an experiment. The whole thing was an experiment. He did games, they did all kinds of stuff. It was the first summer camp, in essence. After the success of that experiment, he went on to write Scouting for Boys, which became a publication that actually came out like a magazine. Every 2 weeks this thing would come out. And what's really interesting, that it was compiled into the first Scout Handbook. BP also wrote the Wolf Cub Handbook in 1916. BP was also the founder of the World Organization of the Scouting Movement, known as WOSM. Okay, that's this thing. Okay, so look up the video. It'll tell you all more about it. In 1923, he actually was knighted. In 1929, he was made Baron of Gilwell. Of course, when you're a baron, the proper address would be Lord, so he became Lord Baden-Powell. In 1909, William Du Bois, a well-known publisher, American publisher, was wandering around in the fog of London and came across a scout, one of BP's scouts, and asked for directions. The history of that is amazing, so look into that. But that really set the seeds in this American writer about the benefits of scouting. Meanwhile, back in the States, Ernest Thomas Seton had started an organization. This organization was known as the Woodcraft Indians, and they had a book put out called the Birchback Rolls, and it really got the interest of a lot of American youth to kind of go back into nature and kind of it was the basics of what scouting was doing in Europe. Now, with Du Bois getting these guys together, they also brought in another gentleman at about the same time named Daniel Carter Beard. And he actually had an organization called the Sons of Daniel Boone. Now, along with all that, they actually brought it all together. That was Du Bois, the teachings of BP, and of course Daniel Beard, and of course Thomas Seton. All those people came together, and there was even more that were brought in, ironically, from the YMCA. That was the interesting thing. And it began to formulate that ideal of scouting. That ideal of scouting formulated in 1910 in the United States. Congress actually granted a perpetual charter to the Boy Scouts of America in 1913. Sea Scouts was actually established in 1912. That carries on even today. Sea Scouts was actually renamed Sea Explorers in 1949. In 1998, Sea Explorers switched back to Sea Scouts. In 2016, Sea Scouts became its own standalone program. You know, today is a very long program, so we're going to take a break, and before we get into Air Scouts and the rest of the scouting stuff, we're going to take a break. This gives you a chance, get a drink of water, just kind of finish making notes if you do that. So we're going to take a break and be right back. Hey, welcome back. I hope you took a little bit of time because this is a lot of information. And because of that, we are putting that link up there. You can go there anytime. Let's get right into it. Air Scouts. Did you know there was Air Scouts? Yeah, there was Air Scouts. Air Scouts began in 1941. Air Scout squadrons were located all over the United States, and it really was in effort for the World War II effort at the time. This went on until 1948. In 1949, it became Air Explorers and went on until 1965. Now, by 1985, it was impossible to get insurance, so it was disbanded. Aviation careers actually continued on in Learning for Life. Air Scouts does exist in other countries, so the American Air Scouts no longer exist, but they do in the Explorer program, which we'll get to. Now, in 1915, really early on in this whole story of scouting, the Order of the Arrow was founded. The founders, Mr. Goodman and Mr. Edson, were in charge of a small scout camp known as Treasure Island. They developed a youth program that helps the camp, and in so doing also helps the scout. From there, the Order of the Arrow grew over time, different ceremonies, different types of things that went on in the Order of the Arrow. But by 1948, it was finally recognized by the Boy Scouts of America. Since then, it has become our honored society. The BSA actually introduced Cub Scouting in 1930. This was for the younger youth to get involved and go from Cub Scouts into Boy Scout troops. In 1935, the BSA actually recognized older boys in a troop. In 1935, they recognized them as explorers. In 1949, the BSA made explorers an actual part of scouting, and they incorporated Air Scouts and Sea Scouts as they became Sea Explorers, the Air Explorers. That was their thing. They brought them in, and they actually started to do that with a lot of stuff to get older people that are in a troop more interested in different careers. In 1959, the Explorers went through a whole revamp, and they went into mainly just careers, and they let Sea Scouts and Air Scouts do their thing. So that was one of their big changes that they made. In 1969, they went totally into different careers. of different things that could go on. Say, for instance, a computer store could have a computer post, an Explorer post. That's the kind of thing that went on. Now, in 1964, BSA actually started desegregating officially, even though it had started back in 1954. In 1991, Learning for Life started to be introduced as a career path, a way to discover different careers. And that was something that was kind of coming out of that Explorer experience. In 2013, Learning for Life became its own affiliate of the BSA. In 1988, the Boy Scouts of America abolished all of the gender requirements for volunteer positions. That meant that females could actually become official Scoutmasters. In 1998, the venturing program was established. Now, this was for older youth, 14 to 21, that they could actually get into a venture crew and start doing great adventures. It was a co-ed program. In 2013, the Scouting for All movement finally got recognized. The Boy Scouts were no longer barring youth for their sexual orientation. The following year, this applied also to the leadership. In 2017, the very first all-girl dens in Cub Scouts were established. In 2019, the BSA established Scouts BSA, which allowed for all-girl troops and all-boy troops to exist within the Scouts BSA. This was great because you had girl dens crossing over to girl troops, which was wonderful. Now, even today, Scouting has difficulties. We all know that. But it's for the betterment of America's youth. This program has seen so much and is so good that the program is now compliant to the Scout law, to be friendly, courteous, and kind to everyone, especially the members of Scouting. That is the wonderful thing about Scouting. It is actually getting better over time. And that's a wonderful thing. We need to support that. And as Scout leaders, that's what we do. We have fun with Scouting. We do things with Scouting. You're going to do some more research, right? On the history of Scouting. That is the wonderful thing. We've been doing this for over 112 years. So it's a thing of its time, okay? You can't judge it wrong, okay? You have to look at it for what it is. And it's gotten better. So that's the wonderful thing about Scouting. The core values are still there from day one all the way to now. Those are still there. It's the method of delivery that may be a little different and a little more courteous and a little more friendly, okay? That's the only thing. That's the only thing. And that's the wonderful thing about Scouting. And we have fun doing this, right? That's what it's all about. So let's get right into the Scouter's Joke of the Week. When does a joke become a dad joke? When it becomes apparent. Wow. Okay, you might have to explain that one to the Cub Scouts, but we have fun with Scouting. And these are jokes you can tell. Hopefully you get a smile. Sometimes you don't, but that's okay. That's okay. Not all these are winners. I didn't guarantee that. But I do guarantee that if you keep doing that good work that you're doing so many great things for America's youth. You are contributing to the betterment of our country. So I really believe that. And keep that hard work going. Keep progressing, getting Scouts involved, making sure they move to the next rank, making sure that they do things. This is what we do. And I really do appreciate your time. So with that, I will let you go, and I will see you on the trail.